Hey, man, you want to play a board game? Nah, man, I'm playing video games right now. The only way I want to play a board game is if it feels like a video game. I'm a video game guy.
Well, what about this one? This one's based on a video game.
What? I can't even see that, man. It's so analog, it's just crazy to my eyes, man.
I mean,
dude, I'm a video game dude, okay? Do you see how accurately I'm portraying video game playing right now?
what's up, everybody? My name is Nick.
I'm just locking in this high score, and I am Mike.
That's right, that's right. Boom. Good
Scene.
Scene. Great opening bit.
I went to college for theater, if you couldn't tell.
He did. And you're a cool dad.
I went into debt for that. I'm a cool dad.
That's right, baby. That's right. What's up, everybody? We are the Brothers Murph, and that's right. Today we're going to talk about some. If you're a video gamer, or if you like video games, maybe you're dipping your toes into board games, or even if you're hardcore into board games, you just want some games that maybe kind of emulate a video game.
Yeah. Give you some of the vibes.
Yeah. So this isn't going to be really like a top 10. Basically, what's going to be is we're going to give you a category of video game, like survival game or something like that, and then we'll kind of talk about some board games that kind of feel like those ones. Instead of being like, this game feels the most like a board game, I was like, that's not really a helpful list and stuff like that.
Sure.
We're also going to keep it to not board games based on video games. So one of the example there was Sniper Elite. We're going to exclude all of those, even though many of them are really, really great. Slay the Spire is great. The Dead Cells game is great.
Yep.
Deep Rock Galactic is great. Sniper Elite is great. They're all really, really good, but we're going to kind of keep away from that because it kind of feels a little too close.
Yeah, so this is going to be more board games that are not based on video games, but still give you some of those video game vibes.
Yeah.
And again, we're going to go by category, so I think we should just hop right in.
But before we do, over on our Patreon, we're going to have 10 more categories of video games and some suggestions for those. So if you want to get some more of this board game, video game goodness, make sure to pop over to the Patreon. And let's go ahead and get into it.
Subscribe to continue. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Continue. Dab on it.
Yeah. So this could be like Tekken, Street Fighter, kind of where you have a character, some kind of hero, and you're fighting each other like that. There's not really many games that kind of really encapsulate that perfectly. There's a new one came called Neon Rain that I believe will be getting to people this year that kind of really emulates that. But the one we're going to talk about is Unmatched, because there's a lot of 1v1 games like Magic and things like that where you're kind of going head to head, but it's just card play. Whereas Unmatched, although it's a card game, there's still a board and you still have like your hero and you're maneuvering around and you are actively trying to hit each other and things like that. But Unmatched is really, really cool because there's a whole bunch of different characters in Unmatched. And for the most part, it's always 1v1. And these characters come from all over the place. There's a bunch from like Myth and Legend. There are a bunch of IP-based ones. Like there's ones, the Witcher ones just came out.
You really want to get a video game.
There's a whole bunch for like Marvel. There's like Jurassic Park. There's stuff like that. But a lot of them are kind of based off of like public domain or kind of Myth and Legend stuff like that. So there's like King Arthur and stuff like that.
That's our favorite stuff, is all the things from
it's really
from various
cool,
stories from across the world.
Yeah, across the world, which is really, really cool. But you're going to take your hero. Sometimes they have sidekicks with them. So like King Arthur has Merlin and things like that. And then every character has a unique deck of cards, completely unique. And you basically have to play out your cards. You can, again, move around the board. You can attack. When you're getting attacked, you can play cards to defend. And it's really about learning that character and getting to play them well. There's a burgeoning tournament scene that's been going on for a couple of years. It is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They keep coming out with more and more and more of it. So now, like, I mean, God, I don't know how many different characters there are, but it's like 50 plus?
At least, yeah. There's a lot of characters.
So there's like a whole bunch. There's a ton of different mashups. Again, some IP-based, some not. It's really, really fun. And it's a really easy system to get into. It's a very simple game when it comes down to it. You can teach about 5-10 minutes and then kind of get into it, because most of the meat of the game is like, how does this character play? How do you work their cards together? And then that kind of 1v1 where you're trying to outmaneuver each other. How are you going to defend against what their character can do? That kind of stuff. It's really, really good. There are a lot of survival board games, or video games, And a lot of video games have survival elements. So a survival game, it'll be like This War of Mine, something like Don't Starve or Frostpunk, even things like Valheim and stuff. Basically things where you are having to explore, you usually have some kind of like food meter, some kind of energy meter, and you basically have to make sure you can survive. A lot of times there's enemies attacking.
Played a lot of Raft, same thing. It's you usually have to build up some sort of shelter for
Raft
yourself.
is probably my favorite. I love Raft so much. But it's like, you're just floating through the world and you just gotta survive, stay fed, stay alive. And so there's a lot of great video games like that, but some great board games are like, there's a couple. There's like Paleo, which is all about kind of surviving. But the one we talk about the most, which really, really encaptures this whole thing, is Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Isle.
Absolutely. So as the title suggests, you land on a cursed isle and you are
cursed.
Robinson Crusoe and crew trying to stay alive. And depending on what scenario you're doing, you're trying to complete the scenario as well. But the primary thing that goes from scenario to scenario is you have to stay fed, you have to keep shelter, you're dealing with weather, and all of these things. As you explore an island and as you come across certain areas that might provide you certain resources or things that you can then collect and bring back to camp and use to build or cook with. And it's very difficult.
Yes.
Because there's all sorts of things.
Super hard.
Where, like an island, you might run into like a snake, and there are these kind of like timing elements to the game where it's like you might come across a snake and nothing happens yet, but then a certain card goes into a certain deck and maybe later it comes out and you're like, oh, that snake went into your boot, and then you try to put your boot on the next morning and it bit you and now you have been poisoned or something. So there's like all these elements of like, oh man, things seem okay right now, but there's things brewing in the in the background that all kind of come and hammer you, and you're all working together to try to achieve these goals.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very, very difficult, he said. And you have different kinds of missions, but there's like weather and stuff. So like you're building up your shelter, it's getting tore down by the weather. It's tough. It's brutal. You're dying all the time. It's really, really
trying to keep morale up, which is difficult.
So if you like those difficult survival video games, make sure to give Robinson Crusoe a try, because it emulates that pretty darn well.
There's just a couple shooter games out there.
There's one or two, There's
one or two.
It's been around because like back in like the Halo days, and of course like Call of Duty's been out forever. But there's so many, like the Fortnites and stuff. There's so many like first-person shooter games out there. There's actually a couple board games that kind of do that well. Real quick shout out to Adrenaline, which is literally supposed to be a first-person shooter in a board game. We unfortunately haven't played Adrenaline, so we can't really properly suggest it.
The entire premise of that is to try to emulate a video game.
Yes, a first-person shooter specific. So make sure to check out Adrenaline. Yeah. But the one we're going to talk about is Project Elite.
Yes, Project Elite is a game where you are running through a certain built map. Yeah. As these kind of like waves of these alien baddies, these kind of bug,
they're kind of coming down.
Are just coming for you, and you're trying to run and get to certain locations to deal with certain objectives and things, or you're just trying to blast a hole through the wave of aliens that are coming. And again, kind of like we mentioned with Robinson Crusoe, there's certain missions and things that you're trying to achieve as a team. But it also adds in a real-time element, which makes it feel more video gamey.
Yeah, and it's cooperative, so everyone's on the same team, and you're kind of playing against the game. And the game, again, is those waves and waves and waves of like monsters coming through. And you basically kind of like talking about what you're going to try and do. Sure. And then you're like, start the timer, and then you kind of have to start doing it, and you're rolling dice. A lot of times the things you want to do don't end up happening because, again, you're kind of frantically going through, but everyone's doing stuff at the same time. We're like, okay, this wave is going to come down hard, so we got to make sure we take care of them so they don't come into our base and all this kind of stuff. And there's different characters, so you're good at certain things, you're kind of not as good at other things, and so you really have to work together. But kind of like a real-time first-person shooter, like a Call of Duty or Halo, it's like you're doing all this in real time. Like you don't have time to like, I'm gonna do this, and now you take your turn, and then you'll do that, and we will destroy the monsters.
That's not how hordes roll.
That's not how hordes roll. They're not waiting for you, and so the whole thing is real time. It's really, really fun, but you kind of got to be down for that real-time chaotic element of it because it is hardcore there in Project Elite, but it's really fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. You get to feel like powerful because at times you're just pulling off these big, attacks and blasting aliens and stuff like that. And so it's really kind of silly, fun, chaotic, in all the right ways. So yeah, kind of like group dependent. If you find the right group that can get down with it,
it's awesome.
It's just a loud, raucous kind of good time. And I think that really kind of hits some of the more fun, kind of chaotic video games where you're, from your locations yelling across and talking, trying to communicate. And I think it does a pretty good job here.
Next up is going to be one, I feel like there's many board games we could choose for this. This is going to be like an RPG game. So these are like games like the Witcher series, the Elder Scrolls series, lots of those kinds of things. Final Fantasy, these kinds of things where Elden Ring, those whole things. It's like they're big. They tend to be kind of open world. You're doing like missions or side quests, those kinds of things. Some of our favorite games, we've played a lot of like the Elder Scrolls games. I really enjoy these kinds of games when I'm not playing my automation games. Because I just want stuff that makes stuff that then makes other stuff. That's what I really want in a video game.
You like to make the tools that make the tools.
I like to make the tools that make the tools, exactly. But nonetheless, RPG games, there's a ton of big, grandiose RPG board games as well. There's things like Gloomhaven. They're all kind of campaign games. There's games like Journeys in Middle-earth where you're going through like kind of a Lord of the Rings campaign. It's really cool. We'll go ahead and talk about, speaking of Elder Scrolls, well, I guess this is kind of based on a video game, but not really. It's kind of just based in the world of a video game.
It's in the world, but it is an Elder Scrolls board game.
But it's not like Skyrim the game.
No.
It's just in that world.
It's in that world, and you might go into the Skyrim area of the map and different things that are from all the games, but the races and stuff are there, but it's not following a particular one of the games. It is just the Elder Scrolls world.
Yeah.
And this is a big game where you are going to be going through these, kind of 3 sections of story, each set in a different part of the world, potentially. And you're going to be going around, you're going to be rocking with a certain guild, and you're going to be building out your character throughout the entirety of this kind of 3-session game. Where you are going to be starting off as a certain race and stuff and a certain class, and that will give you a little bit of an edge in certain areas, but then you have the ability to multi-class and learn new skills.
Yeah.
But you're kind of dealing with your player board that is only holds so much room for things. So if you really want to specialize in shield and sword, you might not get a chance to be very strong in magic because you just don't have room to hold dice, which are the main thing you're using in this game to perform attacks and maneuvers of various sorts and stuff. But I think this one really hits that feeling of like leveling up a character, getting really strong, getting really specialized, or maybe kind of focusing on being kind of a Renaissance man, and being able to do a little bit of everything as you go through this story. Working on kind of overland map moments, encounters and stuff, and of course big fights.
Yes.
You want that good stuff right there to where you can use all those skills you've been acquiring. But I feel like from where you start to where you end is a whole journey your character can really go through. It's very customizable, which I think a lot of these new video games are so great for because you can do any little thing you can kind of think of.
Yeah.
And this game really captures a lot of that.
Yeah, and it really captures the kind of like the big open worldness that is tough to do in board games a lot of times, that kind of big open. This is like, because again, you can like, let's start off in Morrowind and we're going to be doing Thieves Guild stuff. And then the end of the first session, you're like, okay, now we're going over to Cyrodiil and we're going to be doing Mages Guild stuff. And you're kind of exploring around. There's a bunch of side quests you can do. You're delving down into mines or caves. You're doing big fights. There's a lot of stuff, and it really feels that kind of like big, all right, let's go to Skyrim, let's go to this, let's go to that and do these things. But again, you're not really playing the video game. You're not playing those stories. It's just set in that world.
Yep.
But it's really, really cool, and it's really, really fun. And so, there's a lot of RPG games out there, many of which are based on video games as well. But make sure to check them out because a lot of them are very, very good. Next up is going to be strategy games. So these are kind of like grand strategy games, I think is the official term. But these are going to be like things like the Civ games, like Civ 6, now Civ 7. There's like Total War Troy, there's like Crusader Kings, there's a lot of these kinds of big old games, StarCraft, Warcraft, all these kinds of things. And this is also an area that I feel like there's a lot of board games that kind of do this, where
This is
you're
a very
like
common theme in board games.
where it's like some kind of big civilization we were running everything. There's games like Through the Ages, which just feels kind of like Civ 6 and stuff
it's
like
very
that.
much based on those games.
Yeah, there's those kinds of things. There's even games like Root, Scythe, where you have some kind of faction that you're running, all this kind of stuff. We'll go ahead and talk about Civolution, because this one really feels like you're kind of playing God.
Yeah, well, you are.
You literally are in this one,
You are sort of these godlike figures running a weird school project, I suppose, where you're basically overseeing the development of this like civilization. You're molding it in whatever image you wish. And this is a game that gives you this vast menu of options, of types of actions that you can take. different ways you can kind of steer your civilization through the types of cards you end up building, which will be representative of, buildings and monuments and things. There's other types of cards that are going to be like the mutations that your creatures or whatever that you're creating take on, giving them beaks and gills and stuff like that are all going to give you ultimately board game stats and stuff that are going to translate to points. It's all abstract at the very core of it, but it's a really kind of a fun
kind of
a
big
game
sandbox,
where you can go and explore, kind of like in a Civ game. You can go explore the lands and stuff and see what resources are there. You can build out your population. You can kind of specialize.
Yeah.
You can upgrade your action type. So again, there's this huge menu of actions, and all of them have levels 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So you can become, more efficient with the actions you take.
Yeah, and you're only
stuff.
able to upgrade a couple in a game. So it's not like you're gonna be able to do everything. You have to choose, like, what's the path you're going? Am I going this way? Am I going this way? Am I going this way? With in a lot of those kinds of games, especially like a Civ game or something, it's like, oh, I'm trying to do like an economic victory or a culture victory or something like that. And this one, you're kind of like, okay, I have a couple areas that I need to choose what I'm gonna specialize in, but there's a whole bunch of them you can choose from.
Absolutely, and there's these different tracks you can ascend that will give you points for kind of being the leaders on them. There's these 4 eras in the game, and each of them is going to score one of those tracks potentially. So if you can get up there really quickly, you can maximize that kind of scoring. And doing all these things with kind of the flavorings of a Civ game, but literally like thematically, you are kind of from on high, getting in there and shaping the clay in whatever way you want, which I think is kind of cool.
It's very
it's
cool,
set in a non-Earth world. It's just kind of a generic, strange setting and stuff, but it gives you really full control over what happens, sort of, what things take place. And then there's events and things that also occur that will affect the entire game state, all players involved and things like that. But it's really good. And there's a ton of Civ board games that work really, really well. It's a very popular genre of video game for a reason. It's cool to build stuff up from kind of nothing.
Something like a Civ game, like Civ 6, in a lot of ways, it's just a board game. You're literally dealing with like hexes and stuff, like it's turn by turn. Like in a lot of ways, like the Civ games in particular are just board games to some degree, right? So it's like it's one of those things like there's a lot of crossover in those things. You have a lot to choose from, which is really, really great. I just don't see it. Gosh, where? What's up, dude? Can you help me find this, man? I've been hearing this voice just saying, "Where tiger? Where tiger?" So I'm trying to find the tiger,
Okay, so you're looking at our dragon.
Yeah, I assume it was like a cool Where's Waldo thing, like where tiger. So
that on a level makes sense. But are you talking about like we got an email to talk about a game called like Where Tigers, like a board game?
I know that, but I've also been hearing this thing about Where Tiger, and like Where Tigers are a real thing. So like I'm trying to find.
Tigers are not a real thing.
No, they absolutely are a real thing. Yeah.
So when have you ever seen a Where Tiger?
It's Steve Buscemi. He turns into a tiger, and then it's just like, and then he stalks his prey, and it's very hard to find. So I'm trying to find him.
So you're telling me like a Where Tiger could pop up anywhere, and it's definitely not about this board game.
No, exactly. It's not about that. It's about actual Where Tigers, and they're very dangerous.
Wait a second. Oh, there, tiger. Whoa. Well, I learned my lesson, but I'm also going to tell you about a real board game called Where Tigers. It's the sponsor of today's video. In Where Tigers, you are cooperatively working together, trying to survive the night. The sun has set and your village is now in peril as these monsters are going to be invading and coming toward your village, trying to gobble up all of your villagers, destroy your village altogether, and you just need to make it till sunrise. So to do this, you're gonna roll some dice on a turn. You're gonna roll different dice and you're gonna allocate those dice to different villager cards that you've acquired, which are going to give you actions. You're gonna be able to reveal these unknown threats as they progress toward your village, and it's all about making it till sunrise. Can you make it to sunrise? If you think you can, check out the description of this video for a link to follow Where Tigers and get you some of that today. Next up is gonna be puzzle games.
Yeah.
This is gonna be like your classic Tetris. Things where you're trying to find patterns and lock everything into a space and be efficient and things like that.
Yeah, and then you also even have something like Bejeweled where you're kind of trying to like move stuff around in certain spots. Even things like Snipper Clips is a great little co-op puzzle game that we really like on on the Switch and stuff like that. So a lot of these kind of puzzle games where you're trying to fit stuff together, trying to figure out little things. There's things like Framework and Sagrada, where again, you're kind of trying to put stuff next to each other. There's even things like Potion Explosion, which is kind of like Bejeweled or Candy Crushy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But one of the classic ones is just Patchwork, because it's kind of Tetris-y, right?
Yeah, it's very Tetris-y. It's like what they call a polyomino game, so it's not going to be like Tetraminos or Tetris shapes, as little 4 square shapes. These ones, the shapes get even wilder.
Yeah.
They're weirder, and they are representative as different patches, and you're making a patchwork quilt. And that's going to be represented on your player board as you try to fill in as much of your player board as possible, because every space that you don't fill in will lose you points at the end of the game. And then certain patches are going to have buttons which are going to earn you points, but are also your currency for buying more patches. So you're considering a lot of these things, but this is a great 2-player game that is all about taking these shapes that seemingly don't fit in with any other shape and finding ways to place them so that you can fill in your board as efficiently as possible with as few gaps, and also leaving yourself open to making sure you still have room for other shapes later on, because you only have access to up to 3 of the available patches from all told at any one time. So you're dealing with that as well. You're dealing with a timer on the game, because every patch you sew costs a certain amount of buttons, which are your victory points. And it takes a certain amount of time. That's the time it would take to sew in this piece into your quilt. And whoever is furthest behind on the center board, meaning they've spent less time sewing stuff, it's going to be their turn until they pass their opponent on that center track. And when you get to the very middle, your game is done, and then you have to tally up your score. So you're dealing with all of these things in a game that has relatively few kind of pieces to it, but it gives you a lot of stuff to consider, a lot of things to think about. It's very puzzly. It's very spatial and stuff like that. So if that's your kind of thing, like a Tetris, it doesn't have like a real-time element to it, but it's just really trying to visualize how all these pieces can go together in a pretty darn satisfying way.
Yeah, it's really fun. Next up is going to be like dungeon crawler games. So this could be something like your Hades, Diablo, Darkest Dungeon, these kind of things, even like Spelunky or something like that, where you're kind of like trying to find your way through something, crawling through a dungeon, even something like, what was the Mario one we were playing? Mario, that's what it was. What was the one called? It's like the Lord of the Rings.
It's something where you're dwarves.
You're dwarves in Moria, basically. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different kinds of games. And there is a whole genre of board games called dungeon crawlers. There is a ton of dungeon crawler games. Some of them are big campaign games, like a Gloomhaven or an Oathsworn, where you're kind of going into different scenarios. You're constantly going into different dungeons and you're going through them. Some are kind of progressive ones, like Shadows of a Brimstone, where you're literally going through a dungeon. You're kind of discovering it as you go. And then some are kind of one-offs. That's what we're going to talk about, which is going to be Clank. And there's a couple different kinds of Clank. Clank Catacombs is probably the most accurate to this.
Feels most classic dungeon crawly.
Yeah, where you are actively going through looking for loot. The original Clank, you're on a set board, and there's a whole bunch of different boards for it now, so you can still mix it up, but it is the same every time. Whereas Clank Catacombs, you are starting off kind of in the castle, and you are building out the catacombs as you go and as you're discovering things. But the whole premise of Clank is that you are going through some kind of dungeon, and there is a dragon down there, and so you are trying to not make a lot of noise, not make a lot of clank.
You're stealing their treasure.
Yeah, because clank is noise, because you are going down there to take treasure and take loot. And as you take more and more treasure, the dragon keeps getting more and more mad, and then as you're going through the game, you are producing what's called clank, which is you producing noise, and you have to put your kind of cubes in this area. And then a couple times throughout the game, multiple times throughout the game, the dragon is basically going to attack. You have to take all the cubes, throw them in a bag, and you start pulling cubes out of the bag. Yep. And if your cubes get pulled out, that's you taking damage. So it's this big push your luck element where you're like,
big time.
I really want to play this card, but it's going to add 2 more clank, which will then go into the bag, which means I might get hurt more. And so you can play really, really fast and loose. You can kind of try and go down really far in the dungeon. But one of the interesting parts is you can do all the best treasures can be deepest in the dungeon, of course.
Sure.
But you can't even score the game unless you basically get to the halfway point of the dungeon.
You have to get back above ground.
You have to get back above ground. If you don't get above ground, you just lose once the game is over.
That's it.
Straight up. So it's this really nice push and pull that you get in a lot of dungeon crawlers where you're like, gosh, do you go for the loot or do you head back to safety? And it's really, really fun. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of Clank. There's even like a Clank in Space, which is like a sci-fi one. But Clank Catacombs particularly is great because you're building out that map as you go.
Yeah, as you kind of get to the edges of the known map, you'll draw out more tiles and kind of arrange them so the map will kind of reveal itself throughout the game, which is really fun because you can really stumble into something you're like, well, that wasn't great, you know? And I think that is making sense because we're just out here thieving and just going places we shouldn't. So I like that you can sometimes get yourself in a bit of a pickle with that and have to try to find your way to still escape with, you know, all this stuff that you're kind of carrying with you.
Next up is going to be platformers. Now, this is kind of tough to do in board games, but platformers are classic like Mario, Celeste, Cuphead. There's tons and tons of different platformer games.
Knights, you know.
Yeah, those kinds of games. Usually real-time games where you're jumping from various platforms to platforms, think Mario and stuff like that. So it's kind of tough to do. One, we will say, again, we're not really using video game versions of games, but there is a Cuphead dice game, which is actually really, really fun. So check that out as well.
I do recommend it.
But there's a lot of kind of the dexterity games, and particularly real-time dexterity games. So we're going to talk about junk art, because junk art is one of my favorite ones, because also one thing about platformers is usually like different areas that you get to or different levels tend to be quite different. And one of the cool things about junk art is you're essentially playing a bunch of different mini games where you're going to be like stacking a whole bunch of stuff up.
Yeah, it always comes down to you're stacking these strange pieces. They look like junk. And trying to find ways for everything to balance. And so that's kind of the dexterity element. You're kind of trying to get everything just right. But depending on which kind of essentially mini game you're playing, you might be trying to stack just the tallest thing you can make. There might be a real-time thing you're trying to stack and get all of your pieces off the ground as possible, you know, get as fast as you can. There's ones where you're drafting certain elements and trying to like mess over your opponents by giving them the really weird shapes while you take the nice safe shapes. And that's going to change up what you're doing, how it's going to function, what the challenge level is from game to game. And this game is really nice because it scales down to really young, new gamers, kids and stuff can play this because a stacking element is cool. You don't even need to be playing like an official game with this. You can just be playing with the pieces.
It's essentially a big toy,
Yeah, all the way up to things that have like a little bit of a strategy, a little bit of a meta game to it outside of just the dexterity element. And so this game kind of can really service any type of person because it's fun, it's always challenging, it's reminiscent of Jenga and stuff, so it's nostalgic in that way where you're like, is this the piece that's going to make the whole thing topple over? And that's always going to be exciting and fun. And it creates a big moment when, of course, your tower they've been working so hard on fails miserably and comes tumbling down and takes out everything on the table. That's great fun.
It's a good time. Yeah, exactly. So again, it's not quite platformers, but it's that thing where things are always changing. You're having to do stuff a lot of times in real time. You're having to be dexterous and careful and stuff like that. So yeah, check it out. Next up is going to be party games. So there's a lot of these kinds of games. There's like the Jackbox games. There's even games like Among Us or like Mario Party, like games where you're doing like little mini games. You're doing kind of all sorts of stuff like that. And there are luckily many different party games. And so we're going to talk about Telestrations because I low-key think Telestrations is still one of the best party games out there.
Absolutely. Telestrations is a Pictionary and telephone mixed. So Pictionary, if you're unfamiliar, is a game where you have a prompt and you're trying to draw that prompt and get people to guess it. Telephone is a game where you whisper a sentence to people and goes down the line and you see how...
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
I heard join our Patreon. That's what I heard.
Okay, I'm not sure that's correct. Too.
You're trying to do that and the message might get mixed up. And this one does the two together with drawing. So you're going to get a prompt and you're going to draw that prompt to the best of your ability. And then you are going to pass it to your neighbor on the left or right. Everyone's going to pass their thing. And then you are going to get an image. But without the prompt. And based on this image you see, you're like, well, that must be this prompt. And then you're going to write the prompt that you think the image is drawing. And then the next person is going to get that prompt, not seeing the previous image, and they're going to try to draw potentially what is now a new prompt. And it goes on down the line, and really this game just shines because at the end of the game, here's the thing. You can score points in this game. I don't know how or why.
I don't even know what the points are.
I could not care less.
What are the points in this game?
I don't know, but I think there is points. Who cares about that? The great thing is the point of the game is to get your original, pamphlet back. And then go through the images and see the journey of like how people interpreted what you drew, how people interpreted what the next person wrote, and just how kind of crazy the images and prompts get. It's always a hilarious and like wild journey of like, why would you ever think it's this thing? when clearly I was just drawing like a beet farm. That didn't come across to you, you know? Of course
Right.
it didn't. And
course
so
not.
it's just fantastic fun. It's a game that, like, for us, I really like because it doesn't matter if you're good at drawing. It's probably better if you're not because
way
it's going to
better.
make it sillier and stuff. So there's not like the pressure of like, I better have my shading technique down. It's like, no, don't worry about it. It's going to be silly and fun.
Right.
And like with a party game, that's the only thing that matters.
All right, our last category is going to be a category I feel like has really taken storm, and this is going to be cozy games. Cozy gaming has become a really big thing. I think it's really great because it's a lot of, you know, people be like, you're not a real gamer, whatever. It's like, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of that BS has gone
That's the
away.
most
At least more of it.
uncozy thing you could say.
Yeah, exactly, right? So cozy games, a video game, something like Stardew Valley, something like Animal Crossing was huge during the pandemic. So there's a lot of these kind of cozy games.
Of these games.
And there's becoming more and more like cozy games in board games where it's like, sure, there's still strategy, there's still stuff you're doing, but it's not meant to, it's meant to be like a relaxing experience. It's meant to be kind of the end of the night hanging out. There's games like Creature Comforts where you're actively just trying to make like a comforting life for these cool creatures and stuff like that. But what we're gonna talk about is a gentle rain because the whole point is that you're meant to just like take a deep breath, relax, and just play the game with a cup of coffee or whatever.
It's kind of designed as like a mental exercise, like a mental break.
Yeah.
And they mentioned this in the setup. Like in the setup of the game, they're like, hey, put some tiles down. That's pretty much all you need to do to set up the game. They're like, go make a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Go get comfortable.
Yeah.
Get a blanket. Then come and play this game. And it's really meant to be like, hey, you're going to be placing some tiles. The goal of the game is to get these flowers out, but really the goal is to just slow down and kind of focus in on one thing and let the rest of the world fall away
Just
for a
hang out
minute.
for a bit.
Because as you know, it's a little busy and chaotic out there these days with the internet age that we are in and everything else. And this is a remedy to that. This is a way to just slow down for a second. So in this game, what you are doing is placing these tiles. On the four sides of these tiles are going to show half of a certain color of flower. And as you place these tiles into your growing grid, you have to match the color so that they make one complete flower of a color. And once you get four tiles kind of all in a square, it creates a little circle in between, and any of those complete colors of flowers that you have made around that, you can take one of your flower tokens from the side and put it into the middle of that. And the whole goal is to get all of those flowers into your grid before you run out of tiles.
Just a simple little puzzle.
It's meant to be a solo game, or you can play it cooperatively, just each taking turns, but it is absolutely designed with relaxation in mind as a way to mentally slow down for a second, to take that break and just to breathe. It's kind of meditative. And I think it's so cool. Like, we have many cozy board games, but this one is actually designed with a purpose in mind of like just slowing your brain down for a second, collecting your breath. If you had a stressful thing before, let that go, and then kind of move on with your day, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, it's cool that this is
So
the whole
cool.
point of this is that. I just think it's great. Like there's more and more kind of cozy games with like cozy themes, and they're just generally kind of relaxing. It's not like they're not super serious. You can just kind of like relax and play them. But the whole point of this one is like get a cup of tea, relax, take a deep breath, now play the game. It's just like the whole purpose of this game is meant to be like a cozy experience.
Yeah.
So it had to be on here as our pick for this one. So nonetheless, that is 10 different categories of video games and some board games that we feel kind of represent them in the analog world that we tend to live in a little bit more than video games, although we do love video games as well. Sure. We'll be playing some Balatro.
Yeah, on that.
All day. But again, over on our Patreon, we're going to have 10 more categories where we kind of do this same thing. We kind of briefly talk about some different games that kind of match those categories. So if you got a couple extra bucks, you want to go check that out, make sure to check out our Patreon.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to be it for us.
That's going to be it, everybody. You can see our patrons, by the way, scrolling down
Indeed.
here below. We appreciate you, past, current, and future patrons.
That's
We hope you have a fantastic day. Put your picks in the comments below for games, board games that you think really emulate video games well, or a video game category or specific game that you'd love to see have a board game translation. We'd love to see what those are, and maybe it'll inspire some designer out there to make that game once and for all. But until next time, I am Mike.
I'm Nick.
We are the Brothers Murph, and we'll see you real soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for checking out our Not Quite Top 10. Another shout out to Sordain Publishing. Be sure to check out Were Tigers on June 10th when it hits Kickstarter. Oh no. The tiger's back. Mike, the tiger's back!
No, get away from me! Get away from me!